This is great to have Bart Gee with us. Bart's been speaking in Bournemouth this morning and has come up and travelled up and highly motivated. So we are delighted that he's with us this evening. He's going to come and be sharing for this evening together. So we're excited about that. Let's welcome Bart Gee. We're looking forward to him sharing this evening and being challenged and inspired today and this evening. Let's welcome Bart with us tonight. It's great to have you with us, Bart. We're really delighted. Thank you very much.
Well, good evening, everyone. Well, firstly, I want to say thank you to Adrian for inviting me here tonight, and it's great to come up and be part of your church service tonight and to share my story. So as I get underway, I'm gonna share a quick story. Sometimes I get into some funny situations with my disability, and this is probably one of them. When I was 17 years old, I was at sixth form at a secondary school near Bristol. Now, this secondary school, it was a mainstream school, but they had a number of disabled people there. So they had some extra staff there, especially to help out these disabled people. And one of the members of staff came up to me one day saying, "We've got something through the post which you might be interested in. It's regional trials for disabled athletics. Would you like to have a go?" And I thought to myself, well, I've never raced disabled people before. This could be quite good fun. So she said the event's down in Yeovil, which from my house at the time was about an hour and a half's drive. And she said it's in just over 3 weeks' time, so you need to get your entry in pretty quickly. So I thought to myself, well, I'm not very quick, but I can keep going. So I entered for the 1,500 metres. I then thought, if I'm going all the way down to Yeovil, I thought, what's the point in doing one race? I might as well do a second race as well, otherwise it'll all be over too quickly. So I decided to enter for the 400 metres as well. Now, you have to bear in mind that I'd never actually run 1,500 metres before. I'd walked it, but I'd never run it. I thought, it'll be fine. So I trained for it over those 3 weeks. And I gradually built up to it, and I ran the 1,500 metres twice in practice. Well, anyway, it was the day of the event. And I arrived in Yeovil, and my name was called for the starting lineup for the 1,500 metres. And I thought we were going to be put into categories according to our disability. No. There were 3 of us. Just like the Paralympics, I thought, categories, it must be. 3 of us. There was me, there was someone who had cerebral palsy, and the other man, he was partially sighted. He could run just like an able-bodied person. I thought, this is going to go horribly wrong. He just can't see so well where he's going. And anyway, the race got underway, and I was soon well behind the other 2. And it suddenly occurred to me, the partially sighted man, he's going to lap me. Is he going to see me? Fortunately, he ran round me. Then the cerebral palsy man lapped me, and then the partially sighted man lapped me again. And I ended up having to run the whole last lap all on my own. And then coming on to the final bend with 200 metres to go, I heard an announcement over the sound system, "Can Bart Gee please come to the starting line for the 400 metres?" I'm thinking I'm on my way. Do you know what was wrong with the winner of the 400 metres? He was deaf. My only chance was that he couldn't hear the gun. I thought, how is this fair? So I just ran the best part of a mile with my disability, and it was his first race. As you can imagine, that was the only time I ever took part in that event. So one of many stories I could tell. So I'm going to start, before getting into my testimony, I'm going to start off reading some scriptures. So I'm going to start by reading Matthew 14, verse 22 to 33. I think this will be up on screen anyway. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." Now I think immediately when Peter stepped out of the boat towards Jesus, he must have been completely outside of his comfort zone. And once he began to realize the difficulty of the situation with his own strength, that this is impossible, that's obviously when he began to sink and cried out, "Lord, save me." And this shows me that instead of focusing on the difficulty of a situation, to actually put your trust in God, ask him to step in, and he will take control. So, a comfort zone, I think a little bit like being in your own box. You don't expand, you don't develop, and a box has limits. Now, 3 points to do with God. God is omnipotent, as in he is all-powerful. Matthew 19, verse 26, says, Jesus looked at them and said, "With man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible." And then God is omniscient, as in he knows everything. Psalm 147, verse 5 says, "Great is our Lord and abundant in power. His understanding is beyond measure." And then Isaiah 40, verse 28 says, "Have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable." And then God is omnipresent, and as in he is everywhere. Psalm 139, verse 1 to 18 says, "You have searched me, O Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me, your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me, and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark for you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. So if God is omnipotent, all-powerful, if God is omniscient, he knows everything. If God is omnipresent, he is everywhere. This shows to me that God has no limits. So, on to my story. When I was 5 years old, I remember going to a car auction with my family. Dad and my brother had got out the car, and I was sat in the car with Mum on my own. And I said to Mum, I want to become a Christian. How do I become a Christian? Because at 5 years old, sat in the car, I had absolutely no doubt whatsoever about God's existence. So, Mum, first of all, explained to me the scripture from John 3:16, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life." And she said, I need to pray and ask Jesus into my heart. Romans 10, verse 9 to 10 says, "If you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is with your heart that you believe and are justified, and it is with your mouth that you profess your faith and are saved." So there in the car with Mum, that's when I made my own personal decision to become a Christian. I prayed and asked Jesus into my heart, into my life. So I've had the question asked of me. Obviously, you will have noticed by now that I'm physically disabled. If God is real, how come he hasn't healed me of my disability? Now, I do very much believe that God can heal people instantly, but I also believe that God can use people through the difficulty of a situation so that his works can be displayed or for his glory to shine through that person. And one more scripture, 2 Corinthians 12, verse 8 to 10 says, "3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong.'" So, you can see I'm physically disabled. And I was born with a rare disability called arthrogryposis, which means that I have weak muscles and stiff joints. Now, arthrogryposis can affect people in different ways. So, for example, some people might be affected in just their wrist. Some people might be affected, say, for example, in the lower half of their body. For some people, like me, it affects the whole body, particularly the limbs, but it just affects the whole body. And it can affect people in how severe it can be as well. And for me, when I was born, doctors said I would never walk. They said I may never have the strength to be able to sit up independently, and that I would have a very bleak outlook to life. Now, being brought up in a Christian family, the church that I went to, the pastor of our church, he prophesied to my parents, saying little by little that I will be able to do more and more new things that will amaze people. And he prayed for two things specifically. And I very much believe that when you ask God to step into your situation, this is God who is all-powerful, God who knows everything, God who is everywhere. So God who has no limits or knows no impossibility, I believe he can totally transform a situation that is impossible into something miraculous. So, the first thing that the pastor prayed for was that he prayed that one day I would be physically able to walk down the aisle of the church, going completely against what the doctors were saying. Now, I'm not exactly sure how old I was when I was able to sit up independently, but I remember when I was 3 years old, I used to go to physiotherapy sessions very regularly at the Bristol Children's Hospital. And I remember this one session in particular where the physiotherapist propped me up against the wall, just like this. She let go of me and she said, "I want to see if you can start walking." And I remember trying and trying and trying, and I couldn't move. I felt really frustrated because there were other children, 3 years old, up on their feet, running around. I thought, well, why can't I do that? I didn't, at that age, know what my disability meant. I didn't even know that I looked so different from an able-bodied person. I thought maybe I'm just slower than everyone else. Well, so there I was trying and being frustrated at physiotherapy session, but sometime after that, I was about 3.5 years old, and Mum was carrying me up the stairs to go to bed. And as we were going up the stairs, a thought just dropped into my head. Now, you're going to start walking. It was as clear as that to me. So I said to Mum, I think I'm going to start walking now. So in the same way, as the physiotherapist propped me up against the wall, Mum propped me up against the wall. She let go of me. And I took 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, and then I fell down. We tried it again. I took 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, and then I fell down. Now, someone who has a physical disability is often referred to as having physical difficulties. And if you take the word difficult, are there other words with a similar meaning? You may think of the words hard or challenging or tough. Now, is there a word that sums up these words? Take the words difficult, hard, and challenging. Is there a word that sums up these words? And for me, that word I've actually mentioned in one of the scriptures already. With man, this is impossible. But with God, all things are possible. Difficult means possible. Hard means possible. Challenging means possible. So I think it was quite significant, the fact I was able to start by taking 3 steps. Because my first step, I was already aided by the wall, but then both legs were then strong enough to take me unaided, independently, before actually falling down. So just the very fact that both legs were strong enough to take me meant it was the start of something difficult, hard, and challenging, but yet it was still going to be possible. So, I remember the next day, having already taken my first sort of three steps, it was just trying to do a little bit more, and could I actually get from one side of the room to the other, and I'd get part way across, and then I'd get stuck and I'd fall down, and then I'd try again, and then I might get a bit further, and then I'd fall down, and I'd try again. And eventually I made it from one side of the room to the other. And then I tried to do that little bit more each day. And then eventually I got to the level where I was able to start actually walking properly without actually having to think about it. Where, okay, it looks different from an able-bodied person, but it's normal to me, and it's walking. So it was great at that point that I could actually walk. But I didn't want to leave it there. And before I go into activities and things, this is not at all to say, look what I can do, but this is simply to show you the miracle that I believe that God has performed in my life. If you just go back to doctor saying I would never walk, may never sit up independently, and would have a bleak outlook to life. And so as I was growing up, I really wanted to take part in what I could. And I remember particularly at school, I would go out on school break time, and I didn't want to watch my friends play football. I wanted to play football with them. And sometimes I'd actually have to find out my own ways to actually adapt. I don't know people with the same disability as me, so I have no one to follow. So I actually have to find out my own ways. But very often there are ways around. And so I was able to take part in many different sports, including running, football, table tennis, swimming, all at varying levels of ability. And I remember when I was 8 years old, I started having swimming lessons at school. And I remember in my first swimming lesson, my swimming teacher, he put a life jacket on me, and he came in the shallow end of the pool, and he said to me, I want to see if you can start swimming. Now, my disability affects all my limbs. I've got very restricted movement, and I can't actually lift my arms any more than this to actually keep them there. I can swing them, but there's no strength to actually lift them higher. But just the very fact that I've got that little bit of movement in my arms meant that I could move slowly in the water. So, at the end of that lesson, my swimming teacher said, right, I've seen you swim now. I'm going to take your life jacket off, and I want you to go and swim down to the deep end, which for me was quite outside of my comfort zone. Then sometime after that, he was teaching me to stand up by the side of the pool at the deep end, and he wanted me to dive in. Now, again, like most people can dive in using their hands first. Obviously, he had to teach me a different technique. And what it was that I would be stood by the side of the pool, and I would literally just have to fall forwards. And as I'm underwater, I'd have to twist and come up on my back. And I was really quite fearful, quite scared about it, because I couldn't actually see how it was going to work. I was thinking, well, what if I get stuck upside down? And I had to put my trust in the teacher, because my teacher could see the outcome. He could see how it was going to work, even though I couldn't. And I think maybe in the same way, sometimes in our own lives we can face difficult situations. We can't necessarily see how it's going to work. We can't necessarily see the outcome. But God knows, and God is in control. So we need to put our trust in God in the difficulty of the situation. Well, anyway, going back to the swimming, I'm so glad that the swimming teacher, he pushed me outside of my comfort zone, because it has opened up so many more opportunities for me. So I managed to gradually build up, and when I was 11 years old, about 13 years old, I got my 800-meter swimming badge. And then after school, I would have been, I don't know, maybe 22, 23 years old. I would regularly swim a mile. And I'm always looking for new challenges, basically to take on, I suppose, to actually push the sort of boundaries of my disability, just to see what I can do. And so 4 years ago, I did the Sport Relief Swimathon. It was a 2.5-kilometer swim. And then last year, I wanted to go the next level up, and I did the 5-kilometer swim. Now, so that's about that's 200 lengths of a normal swimming pool in a leisure centre. So you have to bear in mind, because I've got very restricted movement in my arms and legs, it took me a long time, but just the very fact that I can move slowly in the water meant it was going to be difficult, hard, and challenging, but yet it was still going to be possible. So the 5K actually took me about 5.5 hours. They were probably ready to close, I think, by the time I finished. Well, probably past closing time. So I managed to do that. And then last year as well, someone also recommended to me a triathlon, which was specially for disabled people to take part in, which was held at Eaton, where they had the rowing for the London Olympics. And I've watched triathlons on television before, and I always like watching them. And when I heard about this opportunity for disabled people, I thought, oh, I'd love to give this a go. So when I entered, I found out there are 3 different distances that you could enter for, and I wanted to go for the longest just to see if I could do it. It was the equivalent of a sprint triathlon for an able-bodied person. So it was a 750-meter open water swim, a 20-kilometer cycle. Now I don't have good enough knee movement to pedal a bike, so I ride a hand cycle. Maybe you've seen them before, but it will be on video in a while anyway. I'm pretty slow on it, but it still gets me. It's still a bit quicker than me walking. And a 5-kilometer run. I'm not actually allowed to run anymore because I've had ankle surgery, but I could still walk it. So I thought, right, I must be able to do this. So let's give it a go. So I trained for it last summer, and a bit like my athletic story, I finished way behind everyone else because everyone who entered the longest distance, out of everyone, I had the worst mobility. So I think the next slowest person beat me by about an hour and a half. But never mind. So I finished it in just over 4 hours, and I've entered it again for this coming August. So my aim is just to see if I can beat my time I'm probably still going to come last, but never mind. So I drive a car which has been adapted for me, and this just gives me so much independence. I steer with handlebars, just like riding a bike, and for the horn wipers, indicators, and the lights, I've got a head control. It just gives me so much independence. So, for example, today I spoke in Bournemouth, so I drove from home down to Bournemouth, up to Nottingham tonight, and then I'll drive back home later. So it'll be roughly a sort of 400-mile round trip. And just to have the independence, I absolutely love driving just for the independence of it. So this is basically the activities side. So if you go back to doctors saying I would never walk, may never sit up independently, and would have a bleak outlook to life. But the pastor prayed that one day I'd be physically able to walk down the aisle of the church. So I very much believe that God has answered that prayer. And the second thing that he prayed for when I was young, the pastor prayed, was that one day I'd be able to play the organ like my dad. Now, Dad used to play the organ at church most weeks, if not every week, and being able-bodied, played both hands and all of his fingers. So it was, and he's an accomplished musician. So it's quite a prayer for the pastor to pray. Now you have to bear in mind that also when I was young, when we were given the bleak outlook, Mum asked with that little bit of hope, because Dad plays the piano and the organ, is there ever any chance of me playing? And the consultant basically said, looking at my hands as they are, there's absolutely no chance whatsoever. There was even doubt that I would have the strength to press down a key. Well, anyway, when I was 5 years old, we already had a piano at home. And Dad would play the piano regularly, just, I think, for fun. And piano, obviously being quite similar to the organ to play with your hands, watching Dad play the piano really inspired me, and I really wanted to start learning to play. So I asked my parents if I could start having piano lessons, just because I preferred the sound of the piano to the organ. And my parents agreed, let's give it a go. So, in my first actual piano lesson, the first thing that my teacher got me to do was, could I actually press down a key? I could with that hand. And I could with that hand. So just the very fact that I've had the strength to press down the key with both hands meant it was the start of something difficult, hard and challenging, but yet it was still going to be possible. So it was pretty slow progress to start off with, as you can imagine. There's quite a lot of working out how I was actually going to play, because it's obviously going to be quite different from the fingering that an able-bodied person would use. But I gradually developed, and when I was 11 years old, I got my grade 5 piano. I then moved to secondary school where the new teacher couldn't take me on. So I taught myself over those few years, and then I did music A-level, and then I went off to Nexus, which is a Christian music college in Coventry. That's where I met Tom. We were in the same year, and I think as I was growing up, really, I suppose from a young age, I always wanted to try and sort of develop on the piano so that I could get to a standard where I could actually play in church, leading from the piano without my playing being a distraction to those worshipping, basically. So I actually now play regularly at my own church that I go to, which is Hope Church in Malmesbury. So that's basically my story. So what I want to leave you with is, next time you face a difficult, hard, or challenging situation, remember that with God, it is still possible